David hadn't been back to his grandfather's ranch in 15 long years. The last time he saw this place, he was just 12 years old, running through the fields during summer vacation. Now at 27, everything had changed. His grandfather had passed away 3 months ago, and the lawyer's letter said the ranch was his. The drive from the city took almost 6 hours. David's old truck struggled on the mountain roads, making strange noises that worried him, but he kept going. The lawyer had told him something that stuck in his mind. The ranch had been empty for more than 10 years. Nobody lived there. Nobody took care of it. It just sat there, waiting. As David turned onto the dirt road leading to the property, he saw how wild everything had become. Trees had grown across the path. Tall grass covered what used to be open fields. The fence posts were falling over, and the gates hung loose on broken hinges. It looked like nature was slowly taking back what humans had built. The main house appeared through the trees, and David's heart sank a little. The white paint had turned gray and was peeling off in long strips. Some windows were broken. The porch sagged in the middle like an old man's back. But the house was still standing. That was something, at least. David parked his truck near the front steps and sat there for a moment, just looking. Memories flooded back. His grandfather teaching him to fish in the creek, learning to ride horses in the corral, evening meals on that porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains orange and red. Those were good times, simple times. He grabbed his backpack and sleeping bag from the truck bed. His plan was simple. Stay one night, look around, take some pictures, and head back to the city in the morning. Then he'd call a real estate agent and sell this place. He had student loans to pay off and a small apartment that cost too much. He couldn't keep a ranch in the middle of nowhere. The front door was locked, but David had the key the lawyer gave him. It took some wiggling, and the door creaked loud enough to scare away some birds, but it opened. Inside, everything was covered in dust. Thick dust, the kind that made you cough just looking at it. Furniture sat where his grandfather had left it, now covered with old sheets that looked like ghosts in the dim light. David walked through the rooms slowly. The kitchen still had dishes in the cabinets. The living room had his grandfather's favorite chair by the fireplace. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms waited silently. Everything felt frozen in time, like the house was sleeping and waiting for someone to wake it up. He decided to set up his sleeping bag in the living room. The couch looked too dusty to use, so the floor would have to do. As he unpacked his things, the sun was getting lower. The light coming through the dirty windows turned gold, then orange, then red. David ate a sandwich he'd brought from the city and drank some water. He was thinking about his grandfather, wondering why the old man had let this place go. His grandfather had loved this ranch. It was his whole life. What had happened to make him leave it behind? As darkness fell, David found a flashlight in his bag and decided to look around outside before it got too dark. The property was big. Besides the main house, there was an old barn, a workshop, and a bunkhouse where ranch workers used to sleep back when the place ran cattle. He wanted to check the buildings, see how bad the damage was. The barn was in rough shape. The roof had holes and animals had clearly been living inside. The workshop was locked and David didn't have a key for it. He'd have to break the lock tomorrow if he wanted to see inside. Then he walked toward the bunkhouse, his flashlight cutting through the growing darkness. It was about 50 yards from the main house, a long, low building with a porch running along the front. As he got closer, David stopped suddenly. Was that light inside? He turned off his flashlight and stared. Yes, definitely light, flickering light like candles. And then he heard something that made his blood run cold. Voices. Female voices. Talking quietly, but he could hear them through the walls of the old bunkhouse. Someone was living in his bunkhouse, on his property, in the middle of nowhere. David's first thought was to run back to his truck and drive away. His second thought was to call the police. But his phone had no signal out here. He'd noticed that on the drive up. The mountains blocked everything. His heart pounded as he stood there in the dark, trying to decide what to do. He took a few steps closer, moving quietly. Through a window with a broken corner, he could see inside. 3 young women sat around a small table. Candles gave the room a soft, warm glow. They were talking, eating something from bowls. One of them laughed at something another said. They didn't look dangerous. They looked normal. But what were they doing here? How long had they been living in his bunkhouse? David must have made a noise, or maybe his shadow moved across the window, because suddenly one of the women looked right at him. Her eyes went wide. She said something quick to the others and all three of them jumped up. David turned to run, but the bunkhouse door flew open. "Wait!" one of them called out. "Please don't run. We're not going to hurt you." He stopped, his heart hammering in his chest. The woman who had spoken stepped out onto the porch. She was tall, maybe in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She held her hands up, showing she had no weapon. "Please," she said again. Her voice shook a little, like she was scared too. "We can explain, just please don't call the police. And please," she took a breath, "you will stay with us tonight. We need your help." David stood there in the darkness, every instinct telling him to run to his truck and get out of there. But something in her voice made him pause. She wasn't threatening him. She was asking, almost begging. The other two women appeared in the doorway behind her. They looked scared, their eyes wide in the candlelight. "Who are you?" David managed to ask. "What are you doing on my property?" "It's a long story," the woman said. "But if you'll give us a chance, we'll tell you everything. Please just stay tonight. By morning, you'll understand." David looked at his truck, then back at these three women who'd somehow ended up living in his grandfather's old bunkhouse. This night wasn't going anything like he'd planned. Nothing like it at all. David stood frozen in the darkness, every muscle in his body tense and ready to run. The three women watched him from the bunkhouse porch, the candlelight behind them making their faces hard to read. Nobody moved for what felt like forever. Finally, the tall woman with the ponytail spoke again. "My name is Claire. This is Amy and Nina." She pointed to the other two women. "We know this looks really strange. We know you're probably scared, but we're scared too." "Scared of what?" David asked, keeping his distance. "And why are you living in my bunkhouse?" "Your bunkhouse?" Claire's face changed. "Wait, are you the owner?" "My grandfather owned this ranch. He died 3 months ago. Left it to me. I just got here today." David's hand moved to his pocket where his truck keys were, just in case. "Now answer my question. What are you doing here?" The three women looked at each other. Some kind of silent conversation passed between them. Finally, Claire nodded like she'd made a decision. "Can you come inside, please? It's not safe to talk out here in the open." She saw David's expression and quickly added, "I know how that sounds. I know you don't trust us. But I promise we're not going to hurt you. We're not dangerous. We're in trouble. Bad trouble." "What kind of trouble?" David asked. "The kind where people might be looking for us," the woman called Amy said. She was shorter than Claire, with light brown hair and tired eyes. "The kind where standing outside in the open isn't smart?" David thought about it. 3 women against 1 guy didn't seem like good odds if they wanted to hurt him, but they'd had plenty of time to do something bad if that was their plan. He'd been in the main house for hours, completely unaware they were nearby. They could have robbed him or worse, but they hadn't. "Okay," he said slowly, "but I'm keeping my keys. And if anything feels wrong, I'm leaving." "Got it?" "Got it," Claire said. She looked relieved. "Thank you, really, thank you." David followed them into the bunkhouse, his senses on high alert. Inside, he was surprised by what he saw. The place was clean. Not just clean, but organized. The old bunk beds that workers used to sleep in had been pushed against the walls. In the center of the room, they'd set up a living area with a table, some chairs, and what looked like camping equipment. Sleeping bags were rolled up neatly in one corner. Supplies were stacked in another. "You've been here a while," David said. It wasn't a question. 3 months, Nina said. She was the quietest of the 3, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to notice everything. "We've been really careful. We clean up after ourselves. We haven't damaged anything. We even fixed some of the roof where it was leaking." David looked around more carefully. She was right. The place looked better than it probably had in years. "Where are you getting power? Water?" "There's a well out back that still works," Claire explained. "We boil the water before we drink it, no power. We use candles at night and solar chargers for our phones during the day. Though we don't really use our phones much. Can't risk it." "Can't risk what?" David pulled out a chair and sat down, deciding he might as well hear the whole story. "Start from the beginning. Why are you hiding in an abandoned ranch in the middle of Montana?" The 3 women looked at each other again. Amy sat down across from David. Claire and Nina remained standing like they were ready to run if they needed to. "We work together," Amy started, "at a pharmaceutical company called MedTech Solutions. Big company. Offices all over the country. We worked in the research division. Testing new drugs, documenting trials, that kind of thing." "Okay," David said. "What happened?" "We found out they were lying. Claire said bluntly. About the test results. One of their new drugs. It was supposed to help people with heart problems. But the trials showed it was dangerous. People were getting sicker, not better. Some people died. David felt a chill run down his spine. And they covered it up? Worse than that, Nina said quietly. They changed the data, made it look like the drug was safe. They were going to release it. Millions of people would have taken it. Millions of people would have gotten sick or died. So you reported it, David said. We tried, Amy said. We went to our supervisor first. He told us we were wrong, that we'd misunderstood the data. But we knew we hadn't, so we went higher. To the director of research. She smiled, thanked us for our concern, and said she'd look into it. But she didn't, David guessed. Oh, she looked into it, Claire said, her voice bitter. She looked into who we were, where we lived, who our families were. 2 days later, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was stolen, but everything was messed up. Pictures were moved. Drawers opened. It was a message. They were telling us they could get to us anytime they wanted. The same thing happened to my place, Amy said. And someone followed Nina home from work. A black car with tinted windows. Just sitting there outside her building all night. David felt sick. Did you go to the police? We went to the FBI, Nina said. We thought they'd protect us. They assigned us a handler, Agent Rodriguez. He seemed nice, professional. He told us we'd done the right thing, that he'd keep us safe while they investigated. Let me guess, David said. Something went wrong. Agent Rodriguez disappeared, Claire said. Just vanished. We were supposed to meet him at a safe house. We waited for hours. He never showed up. His phone was disconnected. We tried calling the FBI office, and they said there was no Agent Rodriguez working there, like he never existed. That's when we ran, Amy added. We didn't know if he was dead or if he was working with the company or what. But we knew we weren't safe. We packed what we could and left the city that night. David tried to process all of this. It sounded crazy, like something from a movie. But the fear in their eyes was real. The way they kept glancing at the windows, listening for sounds outside. That was real too. Why here? He asked. Why this ranch? We needed somewhere remote, Nina explained. Somewhere nobody would think to look. We found this place on a map. It was listed as private property but looked abandoned. We thought we could hide here for a while, figure out our next move. We didn't know anyone owned it, Claire said quickly, or that someone would come. We thought we had more time. More time for what? David asked. To find someone we can trust, Amy said. Someone who can help us go public with what we know. A journalist, maybe. Or a lawyer. Someone who can protect us and make sure the truth gets out. David sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to grab his keys and drive away from this mess as fast as possible. These women were in serious trouble, and getting involved could put him in danger too. But another part of him, the part that remembered his grandfather's lessons about doing the right thing, couldn't just walk away. His grandfather always said there are moments in life when you have to choose what kind of person you're going to be. Easy or right. Those moments define you. Do you have proof? David asked. Of what the company did? Claire's eyes lit up. She hurried to one of the corners and pulled out a laptop from under some camping gear. We copied everything before we left. Test results, emails, recordings of meetings. It's all here. Then why haven't you released it? David asked. Put it online or something? Because the moment we do that, they'll know exactly where we are, Nina said. Every device has a digital footprint. The second we upload those files, they can trace us. And without protection, without someone official backing us up, they'll make us disappear, just like Agent Rodriguez. David looked at these 3 women who'd turned his grandfather's abandoned bunkhouse into a hiding place. They were desperate. They were scared. But they were also brave. They'd risked everything to stop something terrible from happening. Okay, he said finally. I'll stay tonight. Tomorrow we figure out what to do next. But I'm not making any promises beyond that. This is way bigger than anything I know how to handle. That's all we're asking, Claire said, and David could see the relief wash over all 3 of them. Just tonight. Just a chance. But first, David said, standing up, I need to know everything. The whole story. No more secrets. If I'm going to help, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. The women nodded, and as the candles burned lower, they began to tell him everything. Every detail. Every frightening moment. Every reason they'd been running. And David listened, knowing that his simple plan to spend one night and sell the ranch had just become impossibly complicated. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. But looking at these three women who'd risked everything for the truth, he knew he couldn't turn his back on them. Sometimes life doesn't give you easy choices. Sometimes it just asks you what kind of person you're going to be when things get hard, and David was starting to understand what his choice would have to be. The candles had burned down to small stubs by the time the women finished telling David their full story. Outside, the Montana night was completely dark except for stars scattered across the sky like thrown diamonds. Inside the bunkhouse, the temperature had dropped, and everyone had wrapped themselves in blankets. David's head was spinning with information. Names, dates, drug trial numbers, people who'd gotten sick, emails that proved the cover-up. It was overwhelming. But what stuck with him most was the human cost. Real people had died, and more would die if the drug got approved. "Show me the evidence," David said. "I need to see it with my own eyes." Claire opened her laptop, careful to keep the screen brightness low. She'd explained that they kept the device in airplane mode always, never connecting to any network. It was their insurance policy, but also their death sentence if anyone found them with it. The screen glowed to life, and Claire pulled up folder after folder. David saw spreadsheets showing patient outcomes. The official report said one thing, but the raw data said something completely different. There were emails between executives talking in careful language about managing the narrative and adjusting the presentation of findings. Then Claire played an audio recording. It was from a meeting. A man's voice, confident and cold, said, "We've invested too much to pull back now. The drug goes forward. Adjust the reports. Make the problems look like outliers. If anyone asks questions, we deal with them quietly." David felt sick. "That's the CEO?" "Vice President of Research," Amy said. "The CEO knows too. They all know. It goes all the way to the top." "And these patients who died?" David asked, pointing at names on a list. "Real people," Nina said softly. "We tried to find their families after we left. To warn them, but we couldn't risk making contact. These people deserve to know the truth about what happened to their loved ones." David closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't just corporate greed. This was evil, pure and simple, and these three women were the only ones standing between this drug and the public. "Okay," he said, "I believe you. But I still don't understand why you can't just go to the media, send the files anonymously. There are ways to do that, right? Encrypted drops, that kind of thing." "We thought about that," Claire said. "But there are two problems. First, without someone to verify the information, to explain the technical details, journalists might not understand what they're looking at. This isn't simple. It's medical research data. It needs context. And second," Amy continued, "the company has lawyers, lots of them. The moment this goes public, they'll claim the files are fake. They'll say we stole proprietary information. They'll make us the criminals. Without protection, we'd go to jail while they walk free." "That's why Agent Rodriguez was supposed to help us," Nina added. "The FBI has the authority to protect whistleblowers. They could have verified the evidence, provided legal immunity, and made sure we were safe when this went public. But without him, you're on your own," David finished. "We're on our own," Claire agreed. David stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the dark ranch, his grandfather's land. The old man had bought this place after serving in Vietnam. He'd told David once that he'd seen enough of the world's ugliness. He wanted somewhere clean and simple, somewhere honest. What would his grandfather do in this situation? David already knew the answer. The old man would help. No question. No hesitation. He'd see people in trouble and he'd stand up. But David wasn't his grandfather. He was just a guy with student loans and a regular job at a boring office. He wasn't brave. He wasn't a hero. He was ordinary. "Look," David said, turning back to them. "I want to help. I really do. But I don't know what I can do. I'm nobody. I don't have connections to the FBI or the media. I don't know lawyers or politicians. I'm just a regular person." "That's exactly why you can help," Claire said, standing up too. "You're not connected to any of this. Your name won't raise any red flags. You can make calls we can't make. You can move around freely while we have to hide. You want me to be your messenger," David said. "We want you to be our voice," Amy corrected, "just until we can find the right people to take this to. Someone who will listen. Someone who will act. David was about to answer when Nina suddenly held up her hand. "Quiet," she whispered. "Do you hear that?" Everyone froze. In the distance, very faint, was the sound of a car engine. Out here, miles from the nearest town on a private dirt road, there was no reason for a car to be passing by. Especially not at midnight. "Lights," Claire hissed. All three women moved fast, blowing out the candles. The bunkhouse plunged into darkness. David's heart hammered in his chest. Through the window, he saw headlights appearing on the distant road. The vehicle was moving slowly, like it was searching for something. "Or someone. Get down," Nina whispered. Everyone dropped to the floor. The headlights got closer and David could hear the vehicle more clearly now. It was moving at a crawl. As it approached the ranch entrance, it slowed even more. Through a gap in the curtains, David could see it was a dark SUV with tinted windows. Just like the women had described, the SUV stopped at the entrance. Just stopped. The engine idled. Nobody got out. The headlights pointed down the dirt road toward the main house and bunkhouse. David's mouth was dry. He wanted to tell himself this was just a coincidence. Maybe someone was lost. Maybe it was a local rancher checking on the property. But the way the women were pressed against the floor, barely breathing, told him this was exactly what they'd been afraid of. "Do they know we're here?" David whispered. "I don't know," Claire whispered back. "Maybe they're just checking. They've been doing sweeps of rural areas looking for any signs of us." "How do you know that?" "Because we've seen them before. 3 times in the last month. Different vehicles, but always the same pattern. Slow driving, stopping at properties, looking around." The SUV's headlights swept across the property as the vehicle turned slightly. David could imagine someone inside looking through binoculars or a night vision scope, checking the buildings for any sign of life. Minutes passed like hours. The SUV just sat there idling, watching, waiting. Then finally it started moving again, slowly at first, then picking up speed as it continued down the main road and disappeared into the darkness. Nobody moved for a long time after the sound of the engine faded away. Finally, Claire sat up. "That's why we need you to stay tonight," she said quietly. "They're getting closer. They're searching harder. We think they know we're somewhere in this area. They just haven't found us yet." David's hands were shaking. This was real. This wasn't paranoia or exaggeration. Someone really was hunting these women. And now, just by being here, he was part of it. "Why don't we just leave?" David asked. "Right now. All 4 of us. Get in my truck and drive somewhere else. Somewhere safer." "Because they might have cameras on the roads," Amy said. "Motion sensors. We don't know what technology they're using. If we move now, in the middle of the night, we might lead them right to us." "Daytime is safer," Nina added. "More traffic. More cover. But even then, it's risky." David realized he was trapped, not by the women, but by the situation. If he tried to leave now, he might bring those people back. And if they found the women because of him, he'd never forgive himself. "Okay," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. "I'll stay. Tonight we stay put. Tomorrow we make a plan. A real plan. We figure out how to end this." "Thank you," Claire said. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. You just came to check on your property. Instead, you got pulled into our nightmare." "Yeah, well," David said, trying to smile despite his fear. "My grandfather always said life throws you curveballs. Guess this is one hell of a curveball." They decided to take turns keeping watch through the rest of the night. David volunteered for the first shift. He sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the darkness for any sign of headlights. As the women tried to sleep, David thought about how much his life had changed in just a few hours. This morning, his biggest worry was paying rent. Now he was hiding from corporate killers in his grandfather's bunkhouse, trying to protect 3 women he'd just met. But the weird thing was, he didn't want to run. Yes, he was scared. Terrified, actually. But he also felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like what he was doing mattered. Like for once in his ordinary, boring life, he was part of something important. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Most people go through life never having to choose what kind of person they really are. But if you're lucky, or maybe unlucky, life will give you that choice. And when it does, you don't think about it. You don't calculate the risks. You just do what's right and deal with the consequences later. "Okay, Grandpa," David whispered to the darkness. "I hope you're right about this. Because I'm choosing to help. And I really hope I don't get us all killed." Outside, the Montana night was quiet and still. But David knew that somewhere out there people were looking, and sooner or later they would come back. The question was whether he and these three brave women could find a way to stop them before that happened. The answer to that question would determine whether justice got served or whether evil won. And David was determined not to let it be the latter, no matter what it cost him. David's watch shift stretched through the darkest hours of the night. He sat by the window, his eyes burning from staring into the blackness, jumping at every sound. The wind made the old bunkhouse creak. Small animals rustled in the grass outside. Once an owl hooted somewhere close, and David's heart nearly stopped before he realized what it was. Behind him, the three women slept in shifts. Even in sleep, they seemed tense, ready to wake at the first sign of danger. This wasn't rest. This was survival mode, and they'd been living like this for 3 months. Around 2 a.m, Amy woke up and quietly came to sit beside David. "You should sleep," she whispered. "I'll take over." "I'm okay," David said, though his exhaustion was catching up with him. "Tell me more about the company, about how you all ended up working together." Amy pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "We weren't friends at first, just coworkers. The company is huge, hundreds of people in our division alone, but we all worked on the same project. The heart medication, trial number 7734. That's how we ended up seeing the same data." "When did you realize something was wrong?" "Different times for each of us," Amy said. "I noticed it first, actually. I was processing patient follow-up reports. People who'd taken the medication were reporting severe side effects. Dizziness, chest pain, difficulty breathing. Exactly the opposite of what the drug was supposed to do. At first I thought maybe I was reading the data wrong, but you weren't." "No," so I asked Claire about it. She worked in a different department, analyzing the trial results. When she pulled up the official reports, they didn't match what I was seeing. Someone had changed them. "That's when you brought in Nina?" Amy nodded. "Nina worked in documentation. She had access to the archived files, the original unchanged data. When she showed us those files, we realized how big this was. They'd been systematically altering results for months, making dangerous outcomes look rare, making deaths look like they were caused by something else." David felt anger building in his chest. "How many people died in the trials?" "7 that we know of for sure," Amy said quietly. "But there might be more. And if this drug gets approved and released to the public, there could be thousands, tens of thousands. That's murder," David said. "That's what we thought too. That's why we had to do something." They sat in silence for a while. Then David asked the question that had been bothering him. "Agent Rodriguez?" "The FBI guy. What was he like?" Amy's face changed, becoming hard. "He seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. He was professional, reassuring, confident. He told us exactly what we wanted to hear. That we were heroes, that we'd be protected, that justice would be served." "You think he was working for the company?" "I don't know," Amy said. "Maybe, or maybe they got to him. Paid him off, threatened him, whatever. All I know is that he disappeared right when we needed him most. And that felt like a betrayal worse than anything the company did. Because you trusted him." "Because we trusted him," Amy agreed. "We put our lives in his hands and he vanished. Left us with no protection, no plan, no way forward. Just 3 women on the run with evidence that could destroy a billion-dollar company." A sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, slow and careful. David's hand went to his pocket, where he'd put a small pocket knife earlier. It wasn't much, but it was something. The footsteps got closer. Someone was walking around the bunkhouse. David and Amy didn't dare move. Behind them, Claire and Nina woke up, sensing the danger. Then they heard a snorting sound. Amy almost laughed with relief. "It's a deer," she whispered. "Just a deer." Sure enough, through the window, David could see a doe walking past, probably heading to the creek for water. The animal stopped, looked directly at their window like it could sense them watching, then continued on its way. "False alarm," David whispered. But his heart was still pounding. "It's always like this," Claire said softly from her sleeping bag. "Every sound could be them. Every vehicle on the road. Every person we see in town. We're always waiting for the moment they find us." "How do you live like that?" David asked. "You don't really live," Nina said. "You just survive. 1 day at a time. 1 hour at a time. Sometimes 1 minute at a time." David looked at these 3 women, really looked at them. They were young. Claire was 24, Amy 23, Nina 25. They should have been starting their careers, enjoying their lives, making plans for the future. Instead, they were hiding in an abandoned bunkhouse, sleeping on the floor, living in constant fear. "We need to end this," David said. "We need to find a way to make this right." "That's what we've been trying to do," Amy said. "But every path forward seems blocked. We can't trust the authorities. We can't go public without protection. We can't keep running forever." "What about a journalist?" David asked. "Not just any journalist. Someone big. Someone who's known for taking on powerful companies." "We've thought about that," Claire said, sitting up. "But how do we contact them safely? Every email can be traced. Every phone call. If we reach out to the wrong person, someone who's connected to the company, we're done." David thought about this. He wasn't tech-savvy, but he knew there had to be ways to communicate securely. What about encrypted messaging? Or using someone else's computer at a public library? "Still risky," Nina said. "These people have resources we can't imagine. They might be monitoring journalists who cover pharmaceutical companies, waiting for us to make contact, so we're stuck," David said. "We're stuck," Amy agreed. They fell silent again. Outside, the sky was starting to change. Not light yet, but the absolute blackness was fading to dark blue. Dawn was maybe an hour away. "Wait," David said suddenly. "I have a friend. From college, Taylor. We were roommates for 3 years. Lost touch a bit after graduation, but we still text sometimes." "Okay," Claire said. "How does that help?" "Taylor's a journalist. Works for a big newspaper in Seattle. Investigative stuff. Corporate corruption, political scandals, that kind of thing." The three women looked at each other. "Do you trust this person?" Amy asked. "With my life," David said. "Taylor's one of the most honest people I know. Turned down a high-paying job at a corporate PR firm because it felt too much like lying. That's the kind of person Taylor is." "But would Taylor help us?" Nina asked. "This is dangerous. Not just for us, but for anyone who gets involved." "I think so," David said. "Taylor's done stories about whistleblowers before. Helped expose some corrupt politicians a few years ago. Won an award for it. This is exactly the kind of thing Taylor would care about." "How do we contact Taylor safely?" Claire asked. David thought about it. "I still have Taylor's number. But you're right. We can't just call. That could be traced." He paused. "What if I drive into town tomorrow? Use a payphone if I can find one. Or buy a burner phone. Make the call from there." "That could work," Amy said slowly. "But you'd have to be careful. Really careful. Don't use your credit card. Pay cash for everything. Don't go anywhere near security cameras. And don't tell Taylor where we are," Nina added. "Not on the phone. Just ask if Taylor's willing to help. If the answer is yes, arrange a meeting somewhere public but not obvious." "This could backfire," Claire warned. "If your friend says no, or worse, reports it, we'd have to run again." "Taylor won't report it," David said with confidence he didn't completely feel. "I know Taylor. This is exactly the kind of story Taylor lives for." They spent the next hour working out the details. David would drive to the nearest town about 40 miles away. He'd buy a prepaid phone with cash and call Taylor from there. He wouldn't mention the women's names, the company's name, or anything specific. Just ask if Taylor would be interested in a big pharmaceutical corruption story, with whistleblowers who needed protection. If Taylor said yes, they'd arrange a meeting. Somewhere safe. Somewhere the women could bring the evidence and tell their full story to someone who could do something about it. If Taylor said no, or seemed suspicious, David would hang up and they'd try a different approach. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was better than sitting around waiting to be discovered. As the sun started to rise, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and pink, the four of them sat together, drinking instant coffee Amy had made on a small camping stove. They looked exhausted. They looked scared, but they also looked determined. "Thank you," Claire said to David. "You didn't have to help us. You could have driven away last night and forgotten you ever saw us." "I could have," David agreed. "But I didn't, and I won't. We're in this together now." "Together," Amy echoed. "Together," Nina agreed. They finished their coffee as the ranch came to life around them. Birds started singing. The wind picked up, making the grass wave like an ocean. In the distance, the mountains stood tall and solid, like they'd been standing for thousands of years and would stand for thousands more. David thought about those mountains, about how they'd seen so much human drama play out at their feet. Wars and peace, love and loss, good and evil. They'd seen it all and remained unchanged. But people could change things. Small groups of determined people could stand up to power and win. His grandfather had told him that once, had showed him history books full of examples. Maybe, just maybe, 4 people in an abandoned bunkhouse could be one of those examples. Maybe their story would end with justice instead of tragedy. Morning brought a whole new set of challenges. David needed to get to town, but first he wanted to see everything. All the evidence. He couldn't ask his friend Taylor to get involved without being absolutely certain the women were telling the truth. "I believe you," David said as they gathered around Claire's laptop again. "But if I'm going to put my friend in danger, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." "Show me everything." Claire nodded and opened the laptop. She'd charged it using a small solar panel the women had bought at a camping store. Smart. Everything they did was carefully thought out. They'd survived 3 months by being cautious and clever. "This is the main file," Claire said, pulling up a document. "It's called Trial 7734. That was the internal code for the heart medication. The drug was called Cardiozine." David looked at the screen. It showed patient data, lots of it. Hundreds of people had participated in the trial. Each one had a number, an age, a medical history, and a record of what happened after they took the drug. "These green entries are people who had no problems," Claire explained. "Yellow means minor side effects. Red means serious complications." David could see way too much red on the screen. "How many red?" 47 people had serious complications, Amy said. "Out of 200 participants. That's almost 25%. No drug with that failure rate should ever be approved." "And the deaths?" Nina pulled up another file. 7 names. 7 people who'd taken Cardiozine in the trial and died within weeks. David read their stories. A 62-year-old man who had a heart attack. A 55-year-old woman who developed blood clots. A 48-year-old man whose heart just stopped one night. "These are real people," David said quietly. "With families, lives. That's what makes this so evil," Amy said. "These weren't just numbers on a report. They were someone's parent, someone's spouse, someone's friend. And the company knew. They knew and they didn't care." Claire pulled up the official reports next, the ones that had been submitted to the regulatory authorities. In these reports, the data looked completely different. The red entries had been changed to yellow or green. The 7 deaths were listed as being caused by pre-existing conditions or unrelated factors. How did they think they'd get away with this? David asked. "Because they always have," Nina said bitterly. "Companies do this all the time. Maybe not this extreme, but they massage the data, hide the problems, pay off the right people. Most of the time, nobody finds out until it's too late, until the drug's on the market and people are dying." "That's why we couldn't stay quiet," Claire added. "We knew if we didn't speak up, thousands of people would take this drug thinking it was safe. And some of them would die. We'd have blood on our hands just like the company." David scrolled through more files. There were emails between executives discussing the problem of the trial results. One email from the VP of Research actually said, "We can't let 7 unfortunate deaths destroy 5 years of research and billions in potential revenue. Find a way to explain them away." Another email from someone in the legal department suggested paying off the families of the deceased to sign non-disclosure agreements. "Make it generous enough that they won't ask questions," the email said. David felt sick reading it. This was pure corporate evil. People treating human lives like inconvenient obstacles to profit. "Show me the audio recordings," David said. Amy pulled up several files. "These are from meetings we recorded. We knew we needed proof that couldn't be dismissed as fake documents. So we started recording whenever the executives talked about the trial." She played the first one. It was the VP of Research, the same man whose email David had just read. His voice was cold and matter-of-fact as he discussed strategies for managing the narrative around the adverse events. He never said the word death. He said adverse events or unexpected outcomes. The second recording was worse. It was a conversation between the CEO and the VP. They were discussing what to do about the 3 researchers who were asking questions. "Can we fire them?" the CEO asked. "Too risky," the VP answered.
"That might make them talk."
"Better to intimidate them. Make them understand that asking questions is bad for their health." "Do whatever you need to do," the CEO said, "but make this problem go away." David's blood ran cold. That was a direct threat. These men were talking about hurting Claire, Amy, and Nina, maybe even killing them. "When was this recorded?" David asked. 2 weeks before someone broke into my apartment," Claire said. After we heard this, we knew we had to get out. And that's when you contacted the FBI? That's when we contacted Agent Rodriguez, Amy corrected. Or the person we thought was Agent Rodriguez. We still don't know if he was real or if that was just another way to trap us. David sat back, his mind working. Okay, this is solid. Really solid. Any journalist would jump on this story. Any prosecutor would want to bring charges. So why hasn't that happened? Nina asked. Because nobody knows about it. Nobody except us. And every day this goes on, the company gets closer to approval. The drug could be released any time now. David checked his phone. Still no signal out here. What's your mother's medication? He suddenly asked, remembering what Claire had mentioned earlier. What? Claire looked confused. No, sorry, David said. I was thinking out loud. My mother takes medication from MedTech Solutions for her blood pressure. It's been working fine for years. That's part of what makes this so hard, Amy said. MedTech isn't some cartoon villain company. They make good drugs too, medications that save lives. But when profit becomes more important than safety, even good companies do terrible things. David understood. This wasn't simple. Life rarely was. But that didn't change the fact that Cardiozine was dangerous and people needed to know. All right, David said, closing the laptop. I'm convinced. This is real, it's serious, and it needs to get out. I'm going to drive to town and call Taylor. But before I go, we need to make sure you're safe while I'm gone. We've been safe for 3 months, Claire said. That was before that SUV showed up last night, David pointed out. They're getting closer. What if they come back while I'm gone? The women looked at each other. We have a plan, Nina said. If anyone comes, we run to the woods behind the ranch. There's a thick forest back there. We've scouted it, found places to hide. We can disappear in there and wait until it's safe. What about your evidence? The laptop? We have everything backed up on encrypted flash drives, Claire said, pulling out a small USB drive from around her neck. We each have one. If we get separated, the evidence survives. David was impressed. They'd thought of everything. But then again, they'd had 3 months of living in fear to plan for every possibility. Okay, David said. I should leave soon. It's about an hour drive to town. I'll buy the burner phone, make the call, and come straight back. Should be 4, maybe 5 hours total. Be careful, Amy said. Don't speed. Don't do anything that might get you pulled over. If a cop runs your plates and it shows this address, someone might wonder why you're here. And when you're in town, Nina added, act normal. Don't look nervous. Don't keep looking over your shoulder. Just be a regular guy buying a phone and making a call. I can do that, David said, hoping it was true. Claire walked with him to his truck. The morning sun was bright now, warming the air. It looked like a beautiful day. Hard to believe anything bad could happen on a day like this. David, Claire said as he opened the truck door. Thank you. For believing us. For helping us. We've been alone for so long. It feels good to have someone on our side. You're not alone anymore, David said. We're going to fix this. Together. He started the truck and headed down the dirt road, watching the bunkhouse disappear in his rearview mirror. The 3 women stood outside, watching him go. They looked small and vulnerable in the vast Montana landscape. David thought about his friend Taylor as he drove. They'd been close in college. Both of them had wanted to change the world. Taylor had become a journalist to expose the truth. David had ended up in a corporate job that paid the bills but didn't mean much. Maybe this was David's chance to actually make a difference. To help change something for the better. Or maybe he was driving to town to make a phone call that would get them all killed. Either way, there was no turning back now. The choice had been made. The path had been chosen. All that remained was to see where it led. As David's truck disappeared down the road, headed toward town and the phone call that would change everything, the 3 women went back inside the bunkhouse. They didn't know if they'd see him again. They didn't know if he'd help or run. They didn't even know if they could really trust him. But they'd run out of options. Sometimes you have to trust someone. Sometimes you have to believe that people are good and will do the right thing. And sometimes that faith is rewarded. But not always. The next few hours would tell them which kind of story this would be. The drive to town gave David too much time to think. Every mile, every curve in the road, his mind played out different scenarios. What if Taylor said no? What if the call was traced? What if he was making everything worse? His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. He could turn around right now, drive back to the ranch, pack his things, and leave. Tell the women he tried but couldn't help. They'd understand. They'd been let down before. But David kept driving forward. The town was called Cedar Falls, though there were no cedars and no falls anywhere nearby. It was one of those small Montana towns that time had mostly forgotten. Main Street had a grocery store, a hardware store, a diner, and not much else. The bigger stores had closed years ago when the highway bypass was built. David parked on a side street and walked toward the main area. He felt exposed, like everyone could see what he was hiding, but nobody paid attention to him. A few people walked by, locals who nodded politely. A teenager on a skateboard rolled past. Everything was normal. He found a convenience store and bought a prepaid phone with cash, just like Amy had told him to do. The clerk barely looked at him, more interested in his phone than the customer. David also bought a baseball cap and sunglasses. Simple disguise, but better than nothing. Outside, he looked for a quiet place to make the call. There was a small park at the end of Main Street, mostly empty this time of day. David sat on a bench under a tree and powered on the burner phone. His heart pounded as he dialed Taylor's number. He'd memorized it years ago, back when they called each other all the time. Would it still work? Would Taylor even answer an unknown number? The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Taylor's voice cautious. Taylor, it's David, don't hang up. A pause. David, why are you calling from a strange number? Is everything okay? I need to ask you something. And I need you to listen without asking questions until I'm done. Can you do that? Another pause. You're scaring me, David. What's going on? Just listen, please. David took a breath. If I told you I had evidence of a major pharmaceutical company covering up deaths in drug trials, would you be interested? And if I told you there were 3 whistleblowers who need protection to come forward, would you help them? Silence on the other end. David waited, his heart in his throat. Are you serious right now? Taylor finally said. Is this real? Completely real. I've seen the evidence. Documents, emails, recordings. It's all there. But the whistleblowers are in danger. The company is hunting them. They need someone they can trust to help bring this public. David, this is huge. Like career-making huge, but also dangerous. Really dangerous. Companies like that have serious resources. Lawyers, private investigators, politicians in their pocket. I know. That's why I called you. You're the only journalist I trust with this. Taylor was quiet for a moment. David could almost hear the wheels turning, weighing the opportunity against the risk. Where are you? Taylor asked. I can't say on the phone, but I can meet you. Somewhere public but not obvious. Bring whatever recording equipment you need. And maybe see if your paper can provide some legal protection. For the whistleblowers and for yourself. This is really happening, Taylor said, more to themselves than to David. Okay. I'm in. But I need details. What company? What drug? How many whistleblowers? Not on the phone, David said firmly. In person. Can you come to Montana? Montana? You're in Montana? Since when? Long story. Can you come or not? Let me think. Another pause. There's an airport in Billings. I could fly there tomorrow. Early flight. Be there by afternoon. Good. There's a town called Riverside, about 30 miles from the Billings airport. Meet me at the public library there. 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Come alone. David, are you sure about this? You sound different, stressed, I'm sure. And Taylor? Thank you for believing me. For being willing to help. You're my friend. And if what you're saying is true, this is exactly the kind of story I became a journalist to tell. I'll see you tomorrow. David ended the call and immediately removed the battery from the burner phone like he'd seen in movies. He wasn't sure if that actually helped, but it made him feel better. Then he walked to a public trash can and threw the phone pieces in different directions. Part 1 of the plan was complete. Taylor was coming. Now he needed to get back to the ranch and tell the women. But as David walked back to his truck, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A dark SUV was parked across the street. Tinted windows. Just sitting there. The same kind of vehicle they'd seen last night. David forced himself to keep walking normally. Don't run. Don't look scared. Just a guy walking to his truck on a normal day. He climbed in, started the engine, and pulled out. In his rearview mirror, he saw the SUV start moving too. Following him, David's hands shook on the steering wheel. Stay calm. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they didn't know who he was or where he was going. He drove through town at a normal speed, making random turns, trying to see if the SUV was really following him. It stayed back, but it was definitely there. Watching, David made a decision. He couldn't lead them back to the ranch. Not to the women. So instead of heading back on the main road, he turned toward the highway that led in the opposite direction. The SUV followed. David drove faster now, not caring if it was obvious. He needed to lose them. The highway climbed into the mountains, winding and narrow. David knew these roads from when he was a kid visiting his grandfather. He had an advantage. He pushed his old truck harder, taking curves at speeds that made the tires squeal. The SUV kept pace, but it was heavier, harder to maneuver. David saw his chance at a sharp turn. He took it fast, then immediately pulled off onto a hidden Forest Service road he remembered. He drove deep into the trees, killed the engine, and waited. Minutes passed. Then he heard it. The SUV driving past on the highway, searching. It drove by once, twice, then finally the sound faded into the distance. David sat in the silence of the forest, his heart pounding. They'd been following him, they knew. Or at least they suspected. Had they seen him make the phone call? Did they know about Taylor? He had to warn the women. But he couldn't go straight back. What if the SUV was waiting on the road? What if they'd figured out where he was staying? David pulled out his regular phone. Still no signal. He'd have to drive closer to civilization to get service. He started the truck and carefully made his way back to the highway. No sign of the SUV. He drove for 20 minutes until his phone showed bars, then pulled over and sent a text to a number Claire had given him. It was a messaging app that was supposed to be secure. Followed. Lost them. Coming back different route. Be ready to run. The reply came quickly. Understood. We're prepared. David drove back to the ranch the long way, taking back roads and dirt tracks his grandfather had shown him years ago. It added 2 hours to the trip, but he couldn't risk leading anyone to the women. By the time he arrived back at the ranch, the sun was low in the sky. The 3 women were waiting outside the bunkhouse, bags packed, ready to run if necessary. What happened? Claire asked as David climbed out of the truck. He told them everything. The successful call with Taylor, the SUV, the chase, the escape. When he finished, they looked at each other with worried expressions. They're getting closer, Amy said. They must have been watching the town, looking for anyone asking questions or acting suspicious. But they didn't follow you all the way back, Nina pointed out. That means they don't know about the ranch yet. We still have time. Time for what? David asked. They know someone's helping you now. They'll be looking harder. Time to finish this, Claire said firmly. Your friend is coming tomorrow. That gives us less than 24 hours to prepare, to get everything ready, to make sure that when we meet with this journalist, we have everything they need to break the story wide open. And if the company finds us before then, David asked. Then we fight, Amy said simply. We've been running for 3 months. I'm tired of running. If they come, we make sure the evidence gets out anyway. We've got it backed up, hidden, ready to be released if anything happens to us. David looked at these 3 young women, so brave and determined despite everything they'd been through. He thought about his own life, his safe job, his comfortable apartment, his ordinary existence. That life seemed 1,000,000 miles away now, like it belonged to a different person. Okay, David said. What do we need to do? They spent the evening preparing. Claire made multiple copies of all the evidence, storing them in different locations around the ranch. Amy prepared a written statement explaining everything in clear, simple language. Nina worked on a timeline, showing exactly when each crime had occurred. As they worked, David walked the property, making sure they had escape routes if they needed them. He showed the women the root cellar his grandfather had built during the Cold War, hidden behind the main house. It was underground, accessed through a disguised hatch. If things went really bad, they could hide there. Night fell. They didn't light candles this time, staying in darkness. Everyone took turns watching the road, but no vehicles passed. The night was quiet except for the usual sounds of the ranch. David couldn't sleep. He lay on the floor of the bunkhouse staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. If everything went right, Taylor would arrive, get the story, and help protect the women. The morning passed in tense preparation. Everyone moved with purpose, checking and double-checking everything. They had one shot at this, one chance to get it right. There was no room for mistakes. David drove to another small town different from Cedar Falls and bought supplies. Security cameras, the cheap kind you could get at any electronics store. Motion sensors. A battery-powered alarm system. Nothing fancy, but it would give them warning if anyone approached. He paid cash for everything and wore the baseball cap and sunglasses. Nobody seemed to notice him or care. Just another customer buying home security equipment. Back at the ranch, they spent hours setting up the cameras and sensors. David placed them along the dirt road leading to the property, hidden in trees and bushes. Now they'd know if anyone was coming long before they arrived. Nina worked on the laptop, organizing the evidence in a way that would be easy for Taylor to understand. She created a simple presentation that laid out the facts chronologically. Date of first suspicious data. Date executives discussed covering it up. Date of each death. Date they reported it. Date they were threatened. Date they ran. It needs to tell a story, Nina explained, not just be a pile of data. Journalists are storytellers. We need to give Taylor a clear story to tell. Amy practiced what she would say. She stood in front of Claire and David, speaking about the drug trials, the cover-up, the intimidation. Her voice shook at first but grew stronger as she continued. "You're good at this," Claire said. "Clear, passionate, believable." "I'm just telling the truth," Amy replied. That shouldn't be hard. But they all knew it was hard. The truth was often the hardest thing to tell, especially when powerful people wanted it buried. Around noon, David's phone buzzed with a text from Taylor. "Landed on my way. See you at 2. David showed the text to the women. "This is it. In 2 hours, everything changes." They gathered their materials. The laptop. The flash drives. Printed copies of the most damaging documents. Amy's written statement. Nina's timeline. Everything they'd need to make their case. "Should we all go?" Claire asked. "Or just some of us?" David thought about it. The library is public but small. 4 people showing up might look suspicious. What if just Amy and I go first? Taylor can interview you, and then if everything feels safe, we can arrange for Taylor to come here, or meet you somewhere else to talk to Claire and Nina. "I don't like splitting up," Nina said. "What if something happens? What if all 3 of you are there and something happens?" David countered. "At least this way, if there's a problem, 2 of you are safe." They debated it for another 20 minutes, finally agreeing on David's plan. Amy would go with David to meet Taylor. Claire and Nina would stay at the ranch, ready to run if necessary. They had phones and would stay in contact. "If you don't hear from us by 4 o'clock, Amy said to Claire, "assume something went wrong. Take everything and get out. Head to the backup location we scouted." "The old mining cabin," Claire confirmed. 30 miles north. "We remember." David and Amy loaded everything into his truck. As they prepared to leave, Nina grabbed Amy's arm. "Be careful," she said. "Trust your instincts. If anything feels wrong, get out of there." "I will," Amy promised. The drive to Riverside took 40 minutes. Amy sat quietly, clutching a bag with the laptop and documents. David could see her hands shaking slightly. "You okay?" he asked. "Terrified," Amy admitted, but also relieved. "For 3 months we've been hiding. Now we're finally doing something. Finally fighting back." "Taylor's good people," David assured her. "I trust them with my life. With our lives. I hope you're right." They arrived in Riverside at 1:45. The town was slightly bigger than Cedar Falls, with an actual stoplight and a small library on the corner of Main and Oak Street. David parked a block away and they walked to the library. Inside it was quiet and cool. A few people browsed the shelves. An elderly librarian sat at the front desk reading a book. Everything looked normal. Safe. David and Amy found a table in the back corner, away from windows but with a clear view of the entrance. They sat down and waited. At exactly 2, Taylor walked in. David recognized his old friend immediately, though Taylor looked more professional now in a nice jacket and carrying a leather bag. Taylor spotted David and walked over. "Hey," Taylor said, sitting down. Then looking at Amy, "You must be one of the whistleblowers." Amy nodded. "My name is Amy. Thank you for coming." Taylor pulled out a small recording device and a notepad. "Before we start, I need to be clear about something. My newspaper has lawyers and they'll want to verify everything before we publish. This could take time, days, maybe weeks. And once it's out there, there's no taking it back. You'll be in the spotlight. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready since the day we found out people died," Amy said firmly. "Good. Then show me what you have." For the next hour, Amy walked Taylor through everything. She opened the laptop, showed the documents, played the audio recordings. Taylor's eyes grew wider with each piece of evidence. "This is incredible," Taylor said, scribbling notes furiously. "This is worse than I imagined. This could bring down the entire executive board." "That's what we're hoping," Amy said. Taylor looked up from the notes. "You said there are 3 of you?" "Yes, Claire and Nina. They're in a safe location. If you want to interview them too, we can arrange it." "I definitely want to interview them. I'll need all 3 of your stories. And I'll need to verify this evidence. My paper will want independent experts to confirm these trial results are real, and that the company actually falsified them." "How long will that take?" David asked. "If I push hard and if the evidence checks out, maybe a week? 2 at most." "We don't have 2 weeks," Amy said. "The drug could be approved any day. Once it hits the market, people will start dying." Taylor thought about this. "What if we publish a preliminary story? Just the existence of whistleblowers with evidence of falsified trials. That would force the regulatory agencies to delay approval while they investigate." "That could work," Amy said, hope lighting up her face. "That would buy us time." "Okay, I'll need to take all this evidence with me. Make copies. Have our legal team review it. Can you trust me with it?" Amy hesitated. This was everything. Their only leverage. If Taylor disappeared with it, or if the files somehow got lost, they'd have nothing. But they'd come this far. They'd made the choice to trust. "Yes," Amy said. She pulled the flash drive from around her neck and handed it to Taylor. "Everything's on here, but we have backups. If anything happens to that drive, we can get you another one." "Nothing will happen to it," Taylor promised. "I'll guard it with my life. This is the story of my career. I'm not letting it disappear." They talked for another 30 minutes, working out details. Taylor would go back to Seattle tonight, start working with the legal team and fact-checkers first thing tomorrow. Amy would stay in contact using a secure messaging app Taylor provided. In 1 week, they'd meet again with Claire and Nina for full interviews. As they prepared to leave, Taylor looked at both of them seriously. "You're brave. You know that? Most people would have kept quiet, gone along to get along. But you risked everything to do the right thing. That matters. That's real heroism." "We're not heroes," Amy said. "We're just people who couldn't live with staying silent." "That's exactly what heroes are," Taylor said with a smile. David and Amy left the library feeling lighter than they had in days. For the first time since this whole thing started, there was real hope. Taylor believed them. Taylor was going to help. The story would come out. They drove back toward the ranch, Amy texting updates to Claire and Nina. Everything had gone perfectly. Taylor was professional, prepared, and genuinely excited about the story. The preliminary article would run in 3 days, giving the regulatory agencies no choice but to halt the approval process for Cardiozine. "We did it," Amy said, smiling for the first time David could remember. "We actually did it." "Not yet," David cautioned, though he was smiling too. "But we're close. Really close." They were about 20 miles from the ranch when David noticed something in his rearview mirror, a dark SUV, same kind they'd seen before. It was far back, but definitely following them. "Amy," David said quietly, "don't turn around." "But I think we're being followed." Amy's smile disappeared. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure." "Hold on!" David sped up, taking a sharp turn onto a side road. The SUV followed. No more doubt. They'd been found. "Call Claire," David said. "Tell them to get out now, don't wait for us." Amy pulled out her phone with shaking hands and made the call. "Claire, they found us. You and Nina need to leave right now. Go to the backup location. We'll meet you there." David could hear Claire's voice through the phone, urgent and scared. "What about you?" "We'll lose them," Amy said, trying to sound confident. "Just go, please." David pushed his old truck as hard as it would go. The engine complained, making noises that couldn't be good. But the SUV was faster, newer, gaining on them. "David, they're catching up," Amy said, her voice tight with fear. David's mind raced. He couldn't outrun them, but maybe he could outsmart them. Up ahead was a turnoff he knew, a logging road that wound through thick forest. It was rough and narrow. His truck could handle it. A big SUV might not. He took the turn fast, branches scraping the sides of his truck. The road was barely more than a trail full of ruts and rocks. The truck bounced violently, but David kept going. Behind them, the SUV followed but struggled. It was too wide, too low. David heard the sound of metal scraping against trees and rocks. The logging road climbed steeply up the mountain. David's truck groaned but kept climbing. The SUV fell farther behind, finally stopping as the road became too rough to pass. David didn't slow down until they'd crested the hill and descended the other side. Only then did he pull over, engine smoking, both of them breathing hard. "Did we lose them?" Amy asked. "For now. But they know the general area where we are. We can't go back to the ranch." "Not directly." Amy checked her phone. A text from Claire. "We're out. Headed to backup location. Stay safe." David looked at his truck. The engine was making a clicking sound that definitely wasn't normal. "It might not make it much farther. We need a new plan," he said. "Fast." They ended up abandoning the truck on a back road and hiking through the forest. It took 3 hours of hard walking to reach the old mining cabin where Claire and Nina were waiting. By the time they arrived, exhausted and scratched from branches, the sun was setting. Claire and Nina rushed out when they saw them. There were hugs, tears, relief that everyone was safe. "What now?" Nina asked once they were all inside the cabin. It was small and dusty but solid, hidden deep in the woods. "Now we wait," David said. "Taylor has the evidence. The story will break in 3 days. We just have to stay hidden until then." Those 3 days felt like 3 years. They stayed in the cabin, rationing the supplies they'd brought, taking turns keeping watch. Every sound made them jump. Every bird call could be a signal. Every snap of a branch could be someone coming. But nobody came. On the 3rd day, Amy's secure phone buzzed with a message from Taylor. Just 2 words. "It's live." They crowded around the phone as Taylor sent a link. The story was on the newspaper's homepage. The headline in huge letters, "Whistleblowers expose deadly drug cover-up at major pharmaceutical company." Amy read the article out loud, her voice breaking with emotion. Taylor had done an amazing job. Every fact was clear, every piece of evidence explained. The story included statements from medical experts who'd reviewed the data and confirmed the drug was dangerous. It included responses from the regulatory agencies saying they were immediately halting the approval process and launching an investigation. And at the end, it included a statement from the CEO of MedTech Solutions, a carefully worded non-apology that basically confirmed everything was true. "We won," Claire whispered. "We actually won. But the story didn't end there. Over the next week, everything happened fast. The FBI opened an official investigation, this time with agents Taylor's newspaper had verified. The 3 women were placed in real protective custody, not hidden away but actually protected. David gave his own statement about how he'd gotten involved, about the SUVs following them, about the threats. Every piece of the puzzle came together. Executives at MedTech Solutions were arrested. The CEO resigned. The company's stock crashed. Other employees came forward with evidence of other cover-ups, other dangerous drugs that had been pushed through. The families of the 7 people who died in the Cardiozine trials were notified. They filed lawsuits. They demanded answers. They got justice for their loved ones, and the drug that would have killed thousands of people never made it to market. 6 months later, after all the trials and testimony were finished, David stood on the porch of his grandfather's ranch. He'd decided not to sell it after all. Instead, he'd quit his boring corporate job and moved here full-time. The place needed work, but he didn't mind. It felt right to be here. A car came up the dirt road and David smiled. Claire, Amy, and Nina climbed out along with Taylor, who'd become a good friend to all of them during the investigation. "Welcome back," David called out. The 3 women had started a non-profit organization to help other whistleblowers, people who wanted to expose wrongdoing but didn't know how, or were too afraid to come forward alone. They provided legal support, protection, and guidance. They'd already helped a dozen people expose corruption in different companies, and they'd asked David if they could use the ranch for their first retreat. A place where whistleblowers could come to meet, share stories, and find courage in each other's company. "This place looks great," Claire said, looking around at the work David had done. The main house was painted. The bunkhouse was fully restored. The grounds were clean and welcoming. "It should," David said with a laugh. "I've been working on it for 6 months straight." They spent the evening on the porch watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant colors. They talked about everything that had happened, still amazed that they'd survived it, that they'd won. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Amy said. If David hadn't inherited this ranch right when he did, if he hadn't come to check on it that exact week, we might never have gotten the evidence out. We'd still be running, or worse. My grandfather used to say everything happens for a reason, David said. I never really believed that. But maybe he was right. Maybe this ranch was meant to be here at this exact moment to help you. Or maybe, Nina said quietly, good people make good choices, and that's reason enough. Taylor raised a glass of lemonade. To good people making good choices, to standing up when it matters, to finding courage when you're terrified, and to old ranches that become safe havens for people fighting for what's right. They all raised their glasses and drank to that. As the stars came out, filling the Montana sky with light, David thought about how much his life had changed. A year ago, he'd been nobody special, just an ordinary guy with an ordinary life. But then he'd been given a choice, to walk away or to stand up, to play it safe or to do what was right. He'd chosen to stand up, and that choice had made all the difference. Not just for him, but for 3 brave women who'd risked everything for the truth. For the thousands of people who would never take a dangerous drug because it had been stopped. For every future whistleblower who would find courage in their story. One person couldn't change the world. David knew that, but one person could make one good choice. And sometimes that one choice started a chain reaction that changed everything. His grandfather had left him more than a ranch. He'd left him a lesson about what it meant to be a good person. About how standing up, even when you're scared, even when it costs you something, is what defines character. David looked at his friends, these people who'd become like family through shared danger and shared purpose, and he knew he'd made the right choice. The ranch was no longer abandoned. It was alive again, filled with purpose and meaning. It was a place where people came to find strength, where the scared became brave, where the truth found a voice. And David was exactly where he was supposed to be, not despite everything that had happened, but because of it. Sometimes life doesn't give you what you expect. Sometimes it gives you what you need. A test, a challenge, a chance to discover who you really are. David had discovered who he was. He was someone who stood up, someone who helped, someone who chose right over easy, every single time. And that, he thought as the night settled over the ranch, was enough. That was everything, the end of one story. But really it was the beginning of something much bigger. A movement of brave people standing up to power. A community of truth-tellers refusing to stay silent.